The orc woman's spear butt struck the doorstone with its familiar hollow knock, and Thomas Carver felt his chest tighten the way it had every spring for 3 years now, because that sound meant Jara Brightaxe had come back from wherever the winter roads had taken her. He opened the door before she could knock again, lamplight spilling across her face and catching the points of her tusks when she smiled. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from 2 months of hard travel, of sleeping in snowbound camps and eating dried meat by frozen streams. Her leather armor was road-worn and her pack hung heavy on one shoulder, but her dark eyes brightened when she saw him, and Thomas had to remind himself, as he did every spring, that she was not his to hold. "You are predictable," she said, her voice carrying that rough-edged warmth he had spent the winter remembering. "I have not even put down my pack, and you are already at the door." "Maybe I was expecting someone else," Thomas said, stepping back to let her in. The waystation was warm, the fire banked low for the night, and she made a small sound of contentment as she crossed the threshold. Could have been any traveler. At midnight, on this road. Jara dropped her pack beside the hearth and stretched, rolling her shoulders. "The only people who travel this late are fools and orcs under oath, and I am the only orc stupid enough to take this route." Thomas closed the door and barred it, trying not to watch the way the firelight played across her green skin, the way her braided black hair fell across one shoulder. 4 years. She had been coming here for 4 springs now, the first night of every season, and every time he told himself he would be sensible, every time he failed. "I kept your corner ready," he said instead of the 1,000 other things he wanted to say. "Fresh straw in the mattress. Your cup is on the shelf where you left it." Jara turned to look at him, something soft and complicated crossing her face. "You did not have to do that. I wanted to." The silence stretched between them, full of all the words they had been dancing around for 3 years. Then Jara shook her head slightly and moved to the hearth, holding her hands out to the warmth. "The winter routes were cruel this year. We lost 2 wagons to a rockslide in the Iron Pass, and one of our junior guards took a broken leg when her horse spooked. I have been eating nothing but dried fish and arguing with merchants who think they can renegotiate their contract terms in the middle of a blizzard." Thomas moved to the kitchen corner, pulling down the pot he had kept warming on the side of the fire. "Made stew. Figured you would be hungry." "You figured right." Jara accepted the bowl he handed her and ate like someone who had been dreaming of hot food for weeks. Thomas watched her from across the room, memorizing the way she closed her eyes after the first bite, the way her shoulders gradually relaxed as warmth and food worked their magic. This was the pattern they had fallen into. Jara would arrive on the first night of spring, stay for a week while her company rested and resupplied in the valley below, and he would feed her and listen to her stories, and try not to think about the fact that she would leave again. Then she would come back through in summer, heading east and stop for another few days. Autumn would bring her south again, and winter would take her away to routes he could not follow. 4 years of this. 4 years of watching her arrive and depart, of conversations that grew longer each season, of accidental touches that left him aching for days. 4 years of wanting something he could not have, because Jara Brightaxe was sworn to the Eastmarch Caravan Company for 7 years, and road guards could not marry or settle or make promises while their oath remained unpaid. "How was your winter?" Jara asked, setting down her empty bowl. Her voice was casual, but Thomas knew her well enough now to hear the real question underneath. "Did you miss me? Did you think about me the way I thought about you?" "Quiet," Thomas said. "Fixed the roof on the storage shed. Replaced the steps on the east side, the ones that were rotting. Had a few travelers through, mostly tinkers and peddlers heading south before the first snow. Old Marcus came through in February with news from the valley. His daughter got married. That is good. Jara was looking at him now, really looking, and Thomas felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. You look well. So do you. Another silence, this one edged with something sharper. Jara stood abruptly, pacing to the window. 3 more years, she said quietly. I have 3 more years on my contract. Thomas felt his heart sink even as hope flared traitorously in his chest. 3 more years. It had been 4 already, and the oath was for 7. He had known this, had known it from the first time she told him about her service, but hearing her count it down made it real in a way it had not been before. That is not so long, he lied. Jara laughed, a bitter sound. It is forever. It is 3 more winters on the northern routes, 3 more seasons of sleeping in tents and eating bad food and watching for bandits. 3 more years of carrying a spear for merchants who pay me in copper and expect me to die cheerfully if raiders come. You could leave, Thomas said, even though he knew the answer. Break the contract and be forsworn. Jara shook her head sharply. You know I cannot do that. An orc who breaks an oath is nothing. No company would hire me, no community would take me in. I would be worse than homeless. I would be dishonored. Thomas crossed the room to stand beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. I know. I just wish things were different. So do I. Jara turned to face him, and Thomas saw the same longing in her eyes that he felt in his own chest. Thomas, I cannot give you what you want. Not yet. Not for 3 more years. If you want to forget about me to find someone else, I do not want someone else. The words came out harder than he intended, and Jara flinched slightly. Thomas gentled his voice, reaching out to touch her hand. I have spent 4 years waiting for you to knock on that door. I can wait 3 more. That is a long time to wait for something that might not happen, Jara said softly. What if I die on the road? What if I come back changed, or you do? What if we are building our hopes on nothing but wishful thinking? Then we will deal with it when it happens. Thomas laced his fingers through hers, feeling the calluses on her palm, the strength in her grip. But I am not giving up on you, Jara. Not now. Not ever. Jara made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and leaned her forehead against his shoulder. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together, and Thomas committed every detail to memory. The weight of her against him, the smell of leather and road dust and something uniquely her. The way her hand trembled slightly in his. You are going to break my heart, she whispered. Not on purpose, Thomas promised. Never on purpose. Jara stayed for 6 days that spring, longer than usual. They fell into an easy rhythm during the daylight hours, working together to prepare the waystation for the travel season. Thomas showed her the new shelves he had built in the storage room, and she helped him haul firewood and repair the fence around the small garden plot. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing. Jara told him about the cities she had seen on the winter routes, about temples carved from ice and markets that sold spices from across the sea. She described the other guards in her company, the grizzled veterans and the nervous recruits, and Thomas found himself jealous of people he had never met simply because they got to spend more time with her than he did. Thomas told her about life at the waystation, about the rhythms of the seasons and the travelers who passed through. He had bought the place 7 years ago with money saved from his time in the territorial militia, and he had built it into something solid and real. The waystation sat at the junction of 2 mountain roads, remote enough to be valuable as a stopover, but not so isolated that he went weeks without seeing another soul. It was a good life, a quiet life, and he had been content with it until Jara had knocked on his door 4 springs ago and turned everything sideways. On the 6th night, Thomas woke to find Jara standing at the window, silhouetted against the moonlight. He sat up quietly, watching her. "Cannot sleep?" he asked. Jara glanced back at him, and even in the dim light he could see the tension in her shoulders. "I leave tomorrow. I always have trouble sleeping the night before I leave." Thomas rose and crossed to her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Where are you headed?" "East, toward the river towns. One of our regular clients has a silk shipment that needs escorting, and the captain wants our best guards on it." Jara pulled the blanket tighter. "It will take most of the summer. I probably will not be back through until autumn. 5 months. Thomas felt the familiar ache settle into his chest. "I will be here when you get back." "I know." Jara leaned against him, and Thomas wrapped his arms around her, blanket and all. "That is what makes it so hard. I know you will be here waiting, and I will be out there wishing I was here instead." 3 more years, Thomas said quietly. "Then you can stay as long as you want." 3 more years, Jara echoed. She turned in his arms, looking up at him, and Thomas saw his own longing reflected in her face. "Thomas, can I ask you something? Anything? When my oath is paid, when I am finally free, what happens then? Do I just show up on your doorstep and we pretend that 7 years did not pass? Do we go back to being strangers who happen to like each other? Or do we try to build something real?" Thomas cupped her face in his hands, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight roughness of the small scars that marked her jaw. "We build something real. We stop dancing around what we both want, and we make a life together. I will wake up every morning with you beside me, and we will argue about whose turn it is to feed the chickens, and you will probably drive me crazy, and I will love every minute of it." Jara closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I want that so badly it hurts." "Then come back to me," Thomas said. "Come back every time, and when your oath is done, stay." "I will," Jara promised. "I swear it." They kissed then, slow and careful, a promise sealed with touch. When they finally pulled apart, Jara was smiling despite the tears on her cheeks. 3 more years, she said again. And this time it sounded less like a prison sentence and more like a countdown. Jara left at dawn, as she always did, her pack settled on her shoulders and her spear in hand. Thomas walked with her to the edge of the clearing, where the eastern road began its descent toward the valley. "Take care of yourself," he said, the same words he said every time. "You too," Jara replied. She hesitated, then rose on her toes to kiss him one more time. "Wait for me." "Always," Thomas promised, and watched until she disappeared around the first bend in the road. Summer came, and with it a steady stream of travelers. Thomas kept himself busy with the daily work of running the waystation, chopping wood and tending his garden and making repairs to the buildings. He traded with passing merchants for supplies, bartered for news from the wider world, and counted the days until autumn. Jara came back in late September, wind-burned and laughing, with stories about a flooded bridge and a merchant who tried to pay them in cheese. She stayed for 4 days that time, helping Thomas harvest the last of the garden vegetables and shore up the buildings against the coming winter. They talked less that visit, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that came from 2 people who understood each other deeply. The second year followed the same pattern. Spring brought Jara back to the waystation, tired and travel-worn but smiling when she saw him. They spent a week working side by side, falling back into their easy partnership, and Thomas let himself imagine what it would be like when this was permanent instead of stolen moments between seasons. But the second year also brought changes. The Eastmarch Caravan Company was expanding, taking on new routes and new clients, and Jara's responsibilities grew with it. She was promoted to senior guard, which meant better pay but longer journeys and more dangerous assignments. She came through that summer with a fresh scar on her forearm from a bandit skirmish, and Thomas spent 3 days trying not to think about how much worse it could have been. "I am careful," Jara assured him when she caught him staring at the scar for the third time. The bandits were not even good ones. Desperate farmers mostly, driven to the roads by a bad harvest. We disarmed them and sent them on their way. "You could have been killed," Thomas said. "I could be killed crossing the street," Jara countered. "Or falling off a horse or getting sick or any of 100 other things. This is my work, Thomas. This is what I am good at, I know." Thomas took her hand, tracing the scar with his thumb. "I just wish you were not so far away when you were doing it," Jara softened. 2 more years, she said. "Just 2 more years and I can stay here and be as safe and boring as you like." The third year brought a harsh winter, and when Jara knocked on his door that spring she looked gaunt, her face thinner than he had ever seen it. Thomas fed her 3 bowls of stew before he asked what had happened. "The northern routes were snowbound for 6 weeks, Jara said, her voice tired. "We got trapped in a mountain pass with half rations and no way forward or back. Lost 2 oxen, and one of the junior guards took frostbite so bad we thought he would lose his foot. We made it through, but it was close." Thomas felt anger rising in his chest, hot and protective. "Your captain should not have taken you up there in those conditions." "The client paid triple the standard rate," Jara said with a shrug. "The captain made the call that it was worth the risk. And if you had died up there—" "Would the triple rate have been worth it then?" Jara looked at him steadily. "I did not die, Thomas. I am here. I am fine." But she was not fine, not really. She stayed for 9 days that spring, longer than ever before, and Thomas could see the exhaustion carved into her bones. He cooked for her and made sure she slept, and slowly the color came back to her face and the tension eased from her shoulders. On the 8th night, Jara said quietly, "Sometimes I think about what it would be like to just stay. To walk away from the company and the roads and spend my days here with you." "You could," Thomas said, even though he knew she could not. "I could," Jara agreed. "And I would be forsworn, and every orc who heard my name would know I broke my oath. I would bring shame to my family, to my community." "You do not understand what that means, Thomas. For orcs, honor is everything. Without it, I am nothing." "You would still be you," Thomas argued, "strong and brave and kind. That does not change just because you broke a contract." "Maybe not for you," Jara said. "But for my people it would change everything." She reached for his hand. "1 more year, just 1 more year and my oath will be paid. I can survive 1 more year." Thomas held her hand tightly. "So can I." The 4th year started the same as all the others. Jara knocked on the doorstone on the first night of spring, and Thomas opened the door to find her smiling on his threshold. But this time, there was something different in her eyes, something bright and anticipatory that made his heart beat faster. "What is it?" Thomas asked as she set down her pack. "The captain called a company meeting before I left," Jara said. "The Eastmarch is taking on new contracts, big ones. There is a conflict brewing in the eastern provinces, and several of the merchant houses want to move their goods before fighting starts. The pay is incredible, Thomas. Triple what we usually make, maybe more." Thomas felt unease curl in his stomach. "That sounds dangerous." "It is," Jara admitted, "but it is also an opportunity. The captain is offering to send a dozen guards east to handle the war routes, and she is offering to count each season double against our contracts." She gripped his hands, her eyes bright. "Thomas, you understand what that means? If I take one of those positions, I could finish my contract in 1.5 years instead of 3. I could be free by next autumn." Thomas wanted to feel excited, but all he could think about was the scar on her arm, the gaunt look she had worn after the winter in the mountains. "What are the risks?" Jara hesitated. Higher than normal. War routes mean soldiers and supply lines, which means bandits and raiders and possibly fighting. But I am a senior guard now, Thomas. I am not some green recruit who freezes at the first sign of trouble. I can handle it. I know you can, Thomas said, and he did. Jara was one of the strongest, most capable people he had ever met, but that did not stop him from worrying. I just do not want to lose you. You will not lose me. Jara pulled him closer. I will be careful, I will come back. And when I do, I will be free. They talked long into the night, weighing the decision from every angle. By dawn, Jara had made up her mind. She would volunteer for the eastern routes. She would do her time, collect her double credit, and come back to Thomas with her oath fulfilled and her honor intact. Wait for me, she said as she prepared to leave. One more year, maybe a little more, and I will be back for good. I will be here, Thomas promised. Jara did not come back that summer. Thomas tried not to worry, told himself that the eastern routes were long and unpredictable, that she was simply busy with her new assignments. But as autumn arrived and then departed without any sign of her, the worry turned to fear. Winter was the longest of Thomas's life. He kept the waystation running, welcomed the few travelers brave enough to face the mountain roads and snow, and tried not to imagine all the terrible things that might have happened. Jara could be injured or sick or dead. She could have decided that Thomas was not worth waiting for, could have found someone else on those eastern routes. She could have broken her contract and fled, dishonored and lost. When spring finally arrived and Thomas heard the familiar knock on his doorstone, he nearly broke the door in his haste to open it. Jara stood on his threshold, and she was not smiling. Her face was set in hard lines, her jaw tight, and there was something cold in her eyes that Thomas had never seen before. "What happened?" he asked. "Can I come in?" Thomas stepped aside and Jara entered the waystation like she was walking into a battle. She set down her pack and her spear with careful precision, then turned to face him. "The captain wants to send me to the eastern provinces," she said without preamble. "Permanent assignment, 3 years minimum, maybe more. The pay is excellent and the routes are well established, but it would mean no time off, no visits home. I would be gone until my contract is fulfilled." Thomas felt the bottom drop out of his world. 3 years. 3 years without seeing her, without knowing if she was safe, without the spring visits that had become the center of his entire life. "What did you tell her?" he asked, his voice rough. "I told her I would think about it." Jara crossed her arms. "She needs an answer by the end of the week." "Do not go," Thomas said. "Stay on your regular routes. We can wait the 3 years. "Can we?" Jara's voice was sharp. "Thomas, I am 32 years old. I have spent the last 4 years walking away from the only thing I want because of an oath I took when I was too young to know better. If I do not take this assignment, it will be 5 more years of the same. 5 more years of stolen days and goodbye kisses. I do not know if I can do that." "Then break the contract," Thomas said desperately. "We will figure something out. We will go somewhere no one knows you, somewhere your oath does not matter." Jara shook her head. "I already told you I cannot do that. I will not be forsworn, not even for you." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. "Not even for you." As if what they had was not enough, as if 4 years of waiting and hoping meant nothing in the face of an oath to people who saw Jara as nothing more than a hired spear. "Then what do you want me to say?" Thomas asked. "Give me permission to let you go. Tell you it is fine if you disappear for 3 years and come back expecting me to have waited." "I do not know," Jara said, and for the first time since she had arrived, her voice cracked. "I do not know what I want you to say. I just know that I am tired of choosing between honor and happiness, and no matter which one I choose, I lose something I cannot afford to lose." They stood in silence, the space between them suddenly feeling like a chasm. Thomas wanted to cross it, wanted to pull Jara into his arms and promise that everything would be all right, but he did not know if he could make that promise anymore. "How much do you have left on your contract?" Thomas asked finally. "In coin, I mean." "What would it cost to buy out your remaining years?" Jara blinked. "I do not know the exact figure. Maybe 400 silver, maybe more." "Why?" "Because I have money saved," Thomas said. The idea was forming as he spoke, desperate and probably foolish, but better than the alternative. "I was saving it to buy oxen to expand the waystation, but I could use it to buy your contract instead. You could stay here, we could build the life we have been talking about, and your oath would be fulfilled because it would be paid in full." For a moment, Jara just stared at him. Then her expression hardened. "No, Jara, no," she repeated, her voice ice. "Thomas, do you understand what you are suggesting? You want to buy me, like I am a horse or a piece of property. You want to own my contract, which means you would own me until the debt is paid." "It would not be like that," Thomas protested. "I would transfer the contract to you immediately. You would be free." "Would I?" Jara's voice was rising now. "Or would I be bound to you instead, forever grateful that you paid my debt, forever owing you for my freedom?" "Thomas, a warrior who is bought is a warrior who is owned. I will not start our life together as something you purchased." "That is not what I meant," Thomas said, but even as he spoke he could see her point. It had seemed like a solution, a way to cut through all the complicated knots of obligation and honor, but Jara was right. Buying her contract would change everything between them, would turn their relationship into something transactional and unequal. "I know what you meant," Jara said, and some of the anger had drained from her voice, leaving only weariness behind. "You are trying to help. But this is not something you can fix with money, Thomas. This is my oath, my honor, my choice, and I need to be the one who fulfills it." "Then what do we do?" Thomas asked. Jara closed her eyes. "I do not know." She stayed at the way station for 3 days, but it was not like the other visits. The easy warmth between them had been replaced by a careful distance, both of them afraid to say the wrong thing and shatter what remained. They worked side by side in silence, ate meals without really tasting them, and slept on opposite sides of the room. On the morning of the 4th day, Jara packed her belongings and picked up her spear. "I am going to tell the captain no," she said. "I will stay on the regular routes." 3 more years. We can do 3 more years. Thomas wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to make this easier, but he knew there was nothing he could say that would help. So he just nodded and walked her to the edge of the clearing, the same as always. "Thomas," Jara said as she prepared to leave, "about what you offered, buying my contract, I am sorry I reacted so harshly. I know you were trying to help." "You were right, though," Thomas said. "It was a terrible idea. Maybe." Jara adjusted her pack, but it was also kind. "And I do not want to leave things like this with anger between us." "I am not angry," Thomas said, and realized it was true. He was sad and frustrated and afraid, but not angry. "I am just tired of waiting." "So am I." Jara touched his cheek gently. "But we are good at waiting, you and I. We have had practice." She left then, walking down the eastern road, and Thomas stood watching until she was out of sight. Then he went back to the way station and tried to figure out how he was going to survive 3 more years of this. Summer came and went without Jara. Thomas threw himself into work, repairing everything that could be repaired and improving everything that could be improved. He rebuilt the chicken coop, expanded the vegetable garden, and constructed a new shelter for travelers' horses. He told himself he was doing it to keep busy, but he knew the truth. He was building the life he wanted to share with Jara, preparing for a future he was no longer sure would arrive. In late autumn, a messenger arrived at the way station with a letter. Thomas recognized Jara's handwriting immediately and tore it open with shaking hands. The letter was short. Jara had not gone east after all, had turned down the assignment and stayed on her regular routes as she had promised. But the work was harder than ever, the company was understaffed, and she was being asked to take on additional responsibilities. She did not know when she would be able to visit again. She missed him. She was sorry. Thomas folded the letter carefully and added it to the small wooden box where he kept the others. Jara had written to him several times over the years, short notes delivered by travelers or company messengers, and he treasured each one. But this letter felt different, felt like an ending rather than a continuation. He spent the winter in a dark mood, shorter with travelers than he should be, letting the fire burn low and the supplies dwindle. When spring finally arrived, he almost did not bother preparing the corner where Jara usually slept. What was the point, when she might not come at all? But old habits were hard to break, and Thomas found himself putting fresh straw in the mattress anyway, setting her cup on the shelf, chopping extra wood. And when the first night of spring arrived and he heard that familiar knock on the doorstone, relief flooded through him so intensely that his knees went weak. Jara looked older. There were new lines around her eyes and a few silver threads in her black hair, and she carried herself with a weariness that went deeper than simple physical exhaustion. But she was here, and she was smiling, and Thomas felt something tight in his chest finally ease. "I was not sure you would come," he said. "I will always come," Jara replied, "until I cannot any more." They did not talk about the contract or the future that night. They just sat by the fire and held hands, grateful for the simple fact of being together. It was enough. Jara stayed for a week, and slowly the warmth returned between them. They talked about small things, safe things, and avoided the questions that had no good answers. On her last night, Thomas worked up the courage to ask the question that had been haunting him since her letter arrived. "How much longer, Jara? Not the contract, I know that is 3 more years, but how much longer can we keep doing this?" Jara was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," she admitted. "Some days I think I can do this forever if I have to. Other days I think I cannot survive one more goodbye." "We need to figure something out," Thomas said, "because I cannot keep living like this, waiting for you and hoping and never knowing if this will be the last time I see you." "I know." Jara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am working on something. I cannot tell you about it yet, but I am trying to find a way. Trust me." "Always," Thomas said and meant it. When Jara left the next morning, she kissed him with a desperate intensity that left him breathless. "Wait for me," she said. "Just a little longer, please." "I will," Thomas promised, because what else could he say? Summer arrived, bringing with it unusual news. The territorial government was planning to build a new road through the mountains, a broader and better maintained route that would connect the valley towns directly to the eastern trade routes. The new road would pass within 5 miles of Thomas's waystation, close enough to bring him more traffic, but not close enough to make his location obsolete. Or so Thomas thought, until a government surveyor showed up at his door in midsummer, carrying maps and official paperwork. "Mr. Carver," the surveyor said, spreading his documents across Thomas's table, "I am here to inform you that the new territorial road will be passing directly through this location. The government will be purchasing your land and buildings at fair market value, and you will need to relocate by next spring." Thomas felt the words like a punch to the gut. "This is my home. I built this place from nothing." "I understand, and the government is prepared to compensate you generously," the surveyor said. "But the road must go through. The alternative routes add weeks to the journey, and the Territorial Council has decided that the economic benefits outweigh individual concerns." What if I do not want to sell? The surveyor gave him a sympathetic look. Then the government will exercise its right of eminent domain and take the land anyway. You will still be compensated, but you will have no say in the process. I am sorry, Mr. Carver, but this decision has already been made. After the surveyor left, Thomas sat at his table and tried to process what had just happened. In less than a year, he would lose the waystation. He would lose the place where he had built his life, the place where Jara came back to him every season. He would lose everything, unless an idea began to form, fragile and uncertain but growing stronger by the moment. Thomas pulled out his lockbox and counted his savings. 430 silver pieces, earned from years of running the waystation and carefully hoarded against future need. It was exactly the amount he would need. When Jara arrived in early autumn, Thomas was waiting for her with a plan. I need to buy your contract, he said before she had even put down her pack. I know what you said before. I know how you feel about it, but the government is taking the waystation. They are building a road right through here, and I will be forced to leave by next spring. If I buy your contract now, if I pay off your remaining time, you can help me figure out what comes next. We can do it together instead of me trying to plan a future that you are not part of. Jara set down her spear slowly. Thomas, we talked about this. I will not be bought. I know, and I am not trying to buy you. I am trying to save us. Thomas pulled out the lockbox, showing her the carefully counted stacks of silver. This is everything I have saved, Jara, every copper from the last 7 years. I was going to use it to buy oxen, to expand this place, but none of that matters now because the waystation is gone. So let me use it for something that does matter. Let me use it to bring you home. And what happens after? Jara asked. Her voice was carefully controlled, but Thomas could see the emotion in her eyes. You pay my contract. I am released from my oath, and then what? I owe you 400 silver pieces and years of my life. That is not freedom, Thomas. That is just a different kind of cage. Then pay me back, Thomas said. If that is what you need to feel equal, pay me back. You are a senior guard, you make good money. Take whatever work you want and send me payments until the debt is settled. It will take time. But we will have time because you will be here instead of out on the roads risking your life for merchants who do not care if you live or die. Jara turned away, her shoulders tight. You do not understand what you are asking. Then explain it to me, Thomas said, frustration creeping into his voice. Because from where I stand, this is the answer we have been looking for. I pay your contract. You are released from your oath with honor because the debt is fulfilled and we finally get to be together. What am I missing? The part where I spend the rest of my life knowing that you bought me, Jara said. The part where every time we argue or disagree, I have to wonder if you think of me as something you own. The part where I look at myself in the mirror and see a warrior who was purchased like a sack of grain. She turned back to face him, and there were tears in her eyes. I have spent my entire life trying to prove that I am more than what people assume when they see an orc. More than a savage, more than a monster, more than a thing to be used. And now you are asking me to accept being bought, and you do not understand why that destroys me. Thomas felt shame wash over him. She was right. He had been so focused on finding a solution that he had not thought about what it would cost Jara to accept it. I am sorry. I did not mean. I know you did not mean it, Jara said. That is what makes it so hard. You are trying to help and I am grateful, but I cannot accept this. I cannot start our life together knowing that I was purchased, even with the best intentions. Then what do we do? Thomas asked. Because in 6 months, I will not have a home anymore, and in 3 years you will still be bound to a company that is working you to death, and I cannot see a path forward that does not end with us losing each other. Jara wiped her eyes roughly. I do not know. But buying my contract is not the answer. She left the next morning, earlier than she had planned, and Thomas did not try to stop her. They were at an impasse, and he did not know how to bridge it. The autumn was brutal. Thomas watched as government workers began surveying the land around his waystation, marking out where the new road would go, where the buildings would need to be demolished. He received his compensation offer in writing, a sum that was technically fair but felt like a pittance compared to what he was losing. He began making plans to relocate, looking at properties in the valley and trying to imagine starting over somewhere new. But every place he looked at felt wrong, felt like giving up on the dream he had been building with Jara. Winter came, and Thomas spent it in a fog of grief and indecision. He packed up his belongings slowly, sorting through 7 years of accumulated life. He found Jara's cup on the shelf and wrapped it carefully, unable to throw it away. He found the letters she had sent him and read them all, trying to find some clue he had missed, some answer to their impossible situation. When spring arrived, Thomas was not sure if he wanted Jara to knock on his door. Part of him hoped she would stay away, that she would spare them both another painful goodbye. But another part of him needed to see her one more time, needed to know that what they had was real even if it was ending. The knock came on schedule, that familiar hollow sound against the doorstone. Thomas opened the door and found Jara standing there, but she was not alone. Behind her stood an older woman in the colors of the Eastmarch Caravan Company, stern-faced and wearing the insignia of a captain. "Thomas Carver," the woman said. "I am Captain Eleanor Winters of the Eastmarch Company. I need to speak with you about Jara Brightaxe." Thomas felt his stomach drop. "What happened? Is she in trouble?" "Not exactly," Captain Winters said. "May we come in?" Thomas stepped aside and Jara and the captain entered the waystation. Jara would not meet his eyes and Thomas felt fear curl in his gut. "Mr. Carver," Captain Winters began, "Jara has petitioned the company for early release from her contract. She has offered to work double shifts for the remainder of the season to earn the difference, and she has recruited 3 new guards to offset the loss of her service. Under normal circumstances, I would refuse such a petition. Guards who have proven themselves valuable do not grow on trees. But Jara has served the Eastmarch Company with distinction for 6 years, and she has never asked for special treatment before. So I am inclined to grant her request with one condition." "What condition?" Thomas asked. Captain Winters looked at him steadily. "You offered to purchase Jara's remaining contract time for 400 silver. Jara has refused to let you do so, which I respect. But I am offering you an alternative. The new territorial road will need a horse post, somewhere for riders to change mounts and rest between the valley and the eastern routes. If you are willing to accept a contract with the territorial government to run that post, and if you are willing to allow Eastmarch Company to station guards here during the travel season, I will release Jara from her oath early. You get to keep your waystation, Jara gets her freedom, and the company gets a reliable station on a valuable new route. Everyone wins." Thomas looked at Jara, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and fear. "Is this what you want?" he asked her. "It is the only way I could find," Jara said quietly. "I have been working on this since last autumn. Talking to the captain, negotiating with the territorial office, trying to find a solution that did not involve you buying me. This is not perfect, but it is real. It is a way forward." Thomas looked around the waystation, at the home he had thought he would lose, at the woman he had been waiting for. "What would I need to do?" Captain Winters pulled out a sheaf of papers. "The territorial contract is standard. You would agree to maintain the post, provide services for government riders, and allow company use of your facilities. In exchange, The government would pay you a quarterly stipend and allow you to continue operating your way station for regular travelers. The company would pay additional fees for stationing guards here during peak season. Thomas read through the contract carefully, looking for traps or hidden costs, but it was straightforward, almost generous. The territorial government would be getting a valuable service, and they were willing to pay fairly for it. And if I sign this, Jara is released from her oath, effective immediately, Captain Winters confirmed. She has already paid her debt in service. This simply formalizes the arrangement. Thomas set down the contract and looked at Jara. You did all this, negotiated with the captain, worked with the government, found a way to save the way station. I told you I was working on something, Jara said. I just could not tell you until I knew it would work. Thomas crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. You are amazing, he said into her hair. Absolutely amazing. Jara hugged him back tightly. So, is that a yes? You will sign the contract. On one condition, Thomas said, pulling back to look at her. When this is all done, when the paperwork is finalized and your oath is fulfilled, you stay. You stay here with me, and we build the life we have been dreaming about for 6 years. Jara smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. That was always the plan. Thomas signed the contract, and Captain Winters witnessed it with her official seal. The whole process took less than an hour, but when it was done, everything had changed. The way station would remain, converted into an official horse post for the new territorial road. Jara's contract with the Eastmarch Company was fulfilled, her oath paid in full. And they were finally, after 6 long years, free to build a future together. Captain Winters left soon after, promising to send the necessary paperwork to make everything official. Thomas and Jara stood together in the doorway, watching her go, and then turned to face each other. So, Thomas said, what now? Now we figure out how to live together, Jara said. How to share space and make decisions and build a life. I have no idea how to do any of that. Neither do I, Thomas admitted, but we have time to learn. They spent the rest of the day simply being together, talking and planning and occasionally stopping to marvel at the fact that Jara did not have to leave. She unpacked her belongings and hung her spear on the wall, a permanent fixture instead of a temporary visitor. They made dinner together, argued good-naturedly about the best way to cut vegetables, and sat by the fire afterward in comfortable silence. I still want to pay you back, Jara said suddenly. Not the 400 silver, since you did not actually buy my contract, but you sacrificed a lot by signing that territorial agreement. You are turning your home into a government post, taking on additional responsibilities. That is worth something. You do not owe me anything, Thomas said. I know I do not owe you, Jara said, but I want to contribute. I want this to be our home, not just yours. So I am going to find work, probably as a guard for local merchants or as a hunting guide. And I am going to contribute to the household expenses and help improve the place. Partners, right? Equal partners. Right, Thomas agreed, warmth spreading through his chest. Equal partners. The spring turned into summer and they settled into a new rhythm. The territorial government sent workers to improve the road, and Thomas oversaw the conversion of his way station into an official horse post. Jara took on contract work as a caravan guard, shorter jobs that let her come home every few weeks instead of being gone for months. They learned each other's habits and quirks, the small irritations and joys of sharing a life. Thomas discovered that Jara was meticulous about weapon maintenance, but terrible at remembering to put away the cooking pots. Jara learned that Thomas was an early riser who needed silence in the mornings, but loved to talk late into the night. They argued occasionally, usually about trivial things, and learned how to apologize and forgive. In late summer, The first government riders began using the horse post regularly. Thomas set up a rotation system for the mounts, built new stalls, and established relationships with the riders. It was different from running a simple way station, more structured and demanding, but also more secure. The quarterly stipend from the government meant they no longer had to worry about lean seasons or scarce travelers. Autumn brought the first company guards, two young orcs fresh from their training who needed a place to station during the harvest season. Jara took them under her wing, teaching them the routes and introducing them to the local merchants. Thomas watched her work with them and saw a different side of her, patient and authoritative, and fell in love with her all over again. Winter was quiet, just the two of them and the occasional traveler. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading and talking and simply being together. Thomas taught Jara how to cook his mother's stew recipe, and Jara taught Thomas a few words in her native language. They made plans for the spring, talking about expanding the vegetable garden and maybe getting a few pigs. When spring arrived again, it felt different. This time, Jara did not have to knock on the doorstone because she was already there when the season changed. She stood beside Thomas and watched the first travelers of the year arrive, and he saw the contentment on her face. "This is good," Jara said quietly. "This life we are building, it is good." "It is," Thomas agreed. But there was still something unsaid between them, a question that Thomas had been carrying for months. He had been waiting for the right moment, the perfect time, but spring was here and life was moving forward, and he was done waiting. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day of work, Thomas pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside were two simple rings, made by the village silversmith over the winter. Nothing fancy, just plain bands but sturdy and real. "Jara," Thomas said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "I have been thinking about something." Jara looked up from the knife she was sharpening, her expression curious. "That is usually dangerous." Thomas laughed nervously. "Probably, but hear me out." He opened the pouch and showed her the rings. "We have spent 6 years waiting to be together, and now we are together, and it is everything I hoped it would be. But I want more than this. I want to wake up every morning knowing that you are mine and I am yours. I want to stand in front of witnesses and make promises that mean something. I want us to be married, Jara. Will you marry me?" Jara set down her knife slowly, staring at the rings. "Thomas, you know that orcs do not marry the way humans do. We have bonding ceremonies, but they are different. Simpler." "Then we will do both," Thomas said. "Whatever ceremony you want, whatever traditions matter to you, we will honor them. But I also want to marry you by human custom, because that is what will protect you legally, what will make sure you have rights to this place if anything happens to me." Jara picked up one of the rings, turning it over in her fingers. "You have thought about this." "I have thought about nothing else for months," Thomas admitted. "Ever since the captain released you from your contract, I have been trying to find the right way to ask. But there is no perfect moment, no perfect words. Just me, asking you to stay with me. Not for a season or a year, but forever." The silence stretched out, and Thomas felt his heart hammering in his chest. Then Jara looked up at him, and there were tears in her eyes. "Forever is a long time," she said. "I know," Thomas said. "I am counting on it." Jara set down the ring and crossed to where Thomas sat. She knelt in front of him, taking his hands in hers. "I need to tell you something first. Before you ask this, before I answer, you need to know what you are getting into." "All right," Thomas said, fear curling in his stomach. "I am not easy to live with," Jara said. "I have spent most of my life on the roads, and there are parts of me that will never fully settle. I will probably wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, reaching for a spear that is not there, because 6 years of being a guard do not disappear just because I am not doing it anymore. I will probably get restless sometimes, want to take contracts or travel, and you will have to be patient with that. And I will probably make mistakes, big ones, because I have no idea how to be someone's wife. I only know how to be a warrior, and that is not the same thing. I do not want you to stop being a warrior, Thomas said. I fell in love with you exactly as you are, strong and fierce and restless. I do not want you to change, Jara. I just want you to come home to me at the end of the day. Jara's tears spilled over. You are going to make me cry. Is that a yes? Thomas asked. Jara laughed through her tears. Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes, I will marry you, by human custom and orc tradition and any other way you can think of. Yes. Thomas pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, and then Jara pulled back with a watery smile. So when do you want to do this? She asked. As soon as possible, Thomas said. Tomorrow, if we can manage it. We should probably take a little more time than that, Jara said. Give people a chance to come, to witness. And I need to write to my family, tell them what is happening. They will want to be here. Thomas had not even thought about Jara's family. She had mentioned them occasionally over the years, parents and siblings who lived several weeks' travel away, but he had never met them. Will they approve of you marrying a human? I do not know, Jara admitted, but they will come anyway because they are my family and they love me. And if they do not approve, they will keep their mouths shut about it, because disappointing them would be worse. They spent the next several weeks preparing for the wedding. Jara wrote letters to her family and to old friends from her time with the caravan company. Thomas contacted the village magistrate to arrange the legal ceremony and spoke with the local priest about conducting a blessing. They cleaned the waystation from top to bottom, built additional sleeping spaces for guests, and stocked up on food and supplies. Jara's family arrived 2 weeks before the wedding, a traveling party of 6 orcs who descended on the waystation with loud voices and strong opinions. Jara's mother, Kara, was a tall woman with silver streaks in her black hair and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Thomas immediately of Jara. Her father, Durgash, was quieter, a broad-shouldered man who worked as a stone mason and seemed content to let his wife do most of the talking. Jara's 3 siblings ranged in age from mid-20s to late teens, and all of them looked at Thomas with undisguised skepticism. So you are the human who convinced my daughter to give up her career, Kara said the first evening, looking Thomas up and down. You do not look like much. Mother, Jara said warningly. I am just saying, Kara continued. Jara was a senior guard. She could have gone anywhere, done anything. And she gave it all up to live in the middle of nowhere with a man who runs a horse post. I am standing right here, Thomas said. Kara fixed him with a sharp look. I know. I am speaking to you. If you are going to marry my daughter, you had better be able to handle a little criticism. Mother means that she is worried about Jara, Durgash interjected calmly. She is not good at expressing it nicely, but she loves her daughter and wants to know that she will be cared for. I can care for myself, Jara said. Of course you can, Kara said. But that does not mean you should have to. Thomas, tell me why you want to marry my daughter. Thomas looked at Jara, then back at her mother. Because she is the strongest, bravest person I have ever met. Because she makes me laugh and challenges me and makes every day better just by being in it. Because I spent 6 years waiting for her, and now that I have her, I cannot imagine my life without her. And because I love her more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Kara studied him for a long moment, then she nodded once. Good answer. Do not make me regret this. I will do my best, Thomas said. The days leading up to the wedding were chaotic but joyful. Jara's siblings gradually warmed to Thomas, especially her youngest brother, who was fascinated by the horse post operation and asked endless questions about caring for the animals. Friends from the valley arrived, people Thomas had traded with over the years, and a few former members of Jara's company made the trip to attend. Captain Winters sent her regrets along with a generous gift, citing company business that could not be postponed. The night before the wedding, Jara's mother pulled Thomas aside. "I was hard on you when we first arrived," she said, "but I see the way you look at my daughter and the way she looks at you. That is real. Hold on to it." "I will," Thomas promised. "And if you ever hurt her, I will come back here and make you regret it," Kara added pleasantly. "Understood," Thomas said. The wedding itself was a blend of traditions. In the morning, they held the human ceremony in the village, with the magistrate officiating and the priest offering a blessing. Jara wore a simple green dress that matched her skin tone, and Thomas wore his best tunic and trousers. They exchanged the rings he had commissioned and made promises in front of 40 witnesses. In the afternoon, they returned to the waystation for the orc bonding ceremony. This was less formal but more intimate, conducted by Jara's father according to their traditions. They stood in a circle of witnesses, and each spoke about what they saw in the other, what they valued, what they hoped for their life together. Then they exchanged small carved tokens, symbols of their commitment, and Durgash declared them bonded. "Now comes the best part," Jara's youngest sibling announced. "The feast." They had roasted 2 pigs and a dozen chickens, baked bread and pies, and prepared enough vegetables to feed an army. Long tables were set up outside, and as the sun set, everyone gathered to eat and drink and celebrate. There were toasts and stories, laughter and songs, and Thomas felt his heart might burst from happiness. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Thomas and Jara slipped away from the crowd. They walked to the edge of the clearing, to the spot where Thomas had watched Jara depart so many times over the years. "No more goodbyes," Thomas said, pulling Jara close. "No more goodbyes," Jara agreed. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Just hellos and good mornings and all the ordinary moments in between." They stood there in the twilight, listening to the sounds of celebration behind them, and Thomas thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. 6 years of waiting and hoping, of missed connections and painful separations. 6 years of learning each other in stolen moments, of building something real out of brief encounters. 6 years of patience and faith and love that refused to die despite every obstacle. And now, finally, they had forever. The party continued into the night, and Thomas and Jara eventually returned to their guests. They danced and laughed and accepted congratulations, and when the last guest had finally stumbled off to bed, they sat by the fire and looked at their home. "This is really happening," Jara said. "We are really married. You are really my husband." "I am really your husband," Thomas confirmed. "How does that feel?" Jara considered the question. "Terrifying. Wonderful. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and preparing to jump, except you are jumping with me, so I know we will be fine." "We will be fine," Thomas agreed. He took her hand, the one with the ring on it, and laced his fingers through hers. "Better than fine, we will be happy." "Yes," Jara said, "we will." The weeks after the wedding settled into a new normal. Jara's family departed with promises to visit again, and the waystation returned to its regular rhythms. The horse post operation continued to grow as more riders used the new territorial road, and Thomas hired a young man from the valley to help with the increased work. Jara took on occasional guard contracts, but she was selective now, choosing only jobs that would let her come home quickly. In late spring, Jara came to Thomas with news. "I spoke with some merchants in the valley," she said. "They need a security consultant, someone to assess their warehouses and suggest improvements. It would be regular work, a few days each month, and the pay is good. I think I want to try it." "That sounds perfect," Thomas said. "Different from road guarding, but still using your skills." "That is what I thought," Jara smiled. "I am tired of being away from home. This way I can work and still sleep in my own bed most nights." Thomas pulled her into his arms. "Our bed," he corrected. "Our bed," Jara agreed. Summer brought changes to the region. The new territorial road was officially opened, with a ceremony attended by government officials and local dignitaries. Thomas and Jara attended as representatives of the horse post, and they watched as the first official coaches rolled down the improved route. The road brought increased traffic to the way station, more travelers and more business, and Thomas hired 2 additional helpers to manage the work. Autumn arrived with a surprise. Jara came home from the valley one day with a thoughtful expression on her face. "I met someone today," she said. "A young orc girl, maybe 16, who just finished her training as a guard. She is looking for work, but the companies want experienced fighters. I told her about the horse post, about how we sometimes need extra security when the government riders are carrying valuable cargo. She is interested." "You want to hire her," Thomas said. "I want to give her a chance," Jara said. "The way Captain Winters gave me a chance 6 years ago. She has potential, but she needs someone to believe in her." "Then we hire her," Thomas said. "We have the space, and you are right, we could use the extra security." The girl's name was Kessa, and she arrived 2 days later, nervous and eager. Jara took her on as an apprentice of sorts, teaching her about the horse post operation, and occasionally taking her along on the security consulting jobs. Kessa proved to be quick-witted and hard-working, and within a few weeks, she had become an integral part of the household. Winter was quiet again, just Thomas, Jara, and Kessa keeping the post running through the cold months. They spent the long evenings by the fire, telling stories and playing dice games, and Thomas thought about how much his life had changed. 2 years ago he had been alone, waiting desperately for Jara's spring visit. Now he had a wife, an apprentice, a thriving business, and a home full of life and warmth. When spring arrived again, Thomas woke to find Jara standing at the window, looking out at the sunrise. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Jara glanced back at him with a smile. "I was thinking about the first time I knocked on your door, 4 years ago now. I was tired and cold and angry at the world, and you opened the door and welcomed me in like I was someone worth knowing. Do you remember?" "I remember," Thomas said. "I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Jara laughed. "I was covered in road dust and probably smelled like a wet dog." "Still beautiful," Thomas insisted. He got out of bed and crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I fell in love with you that first night, I think. I just did not know it yet." "I knew it," Jara said. "I knew it by the second night when you made me stew and did not ask for anything in return. I knew you were going to be trouble." "Good trouble or bad trouble, the best trouble," Jara said. She turned in his arms to face him. "Thomas, I have been thinking about something, about the future." "What about it? We have been married almost a year now, and this life we have built is good, better than I ever imagined, but I wonder sometimes if it could be even better, if we could add to it." Thomas felt his heart skip a beat. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I think I want children," Jara said. "Not right away, maybe not for another year or 2, but someday. I want to fill this house with more than just the 2 of us and however many apprentices we take on. I want to build a family." Thomas kissed her, long and deep. "Yes," he said when they finally broke apart. "Yes to all of it. Yes to children and family and filling this house with life. Yes to everything." Jara smiled, that brilliant smile that still made his heart race after all this time. Then we have a plan. They did not rush into parenthood. They spent the next year continuing to build their life together, expanding the horse post, taking on more staff, and establishing themselves as a crucial stop on the territorial road. Jara's security consulting business grew, and she became known throughout the valley as an expert in defensive planning. Thomas's reputation as a fair and reliable postmaster brought them consistent business and good relationships with the government officials who oversaw the road system. In the second year of their marriage, Jara came to Thomas with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant. They would have a child by late autumn. "Are you scared?" Thomas asked, holding her close. "Terrified," Jara admitted, "but also excited. We are going to be parents, Thomas. We are going to have a baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Jara struggled with sickness in the early months and exhaustion later on, but she remained stubborn and determined, continuing to work until the final weeks. Thomas hovered, earning himself several sharp words about overprotective husbands, but Jara softened when she saw the worry in his eyes. "I am strong," she reminded him. "I have survived blizzards and bandits and 6 years on the roads. I can survive having a baby." "I know," Thomas said. "But that does not mean I cannot worry." Their daughter was born on a cold autumn night, with Jara's mother and the village midwife in attendance. The labor was long and difficult, and Thomas spent hours pacing outside the room, listening to Jara's occasional cries and feeling helpless. But when he was finally called in, when he saw Jara holding their tiny daughter, all the fear and worry evaporated. "She is perfect," Jara said, her voice full of wonder. She had tears streaming down her face and she looked exhausted and radiant all at once. "Thomas, look at her. She is perfect." The baby had green skin like her mother, but softer, more muted. Her ears came to small points, and when she yawned, Thomas could see the tiniest buds of tusks beginning to form. She had his brown eyes and Jara's black hair, and she was indeed perfect. "What should we name her?" Thomas asked. Jara considered. "Kira," she said. "It means new beginning in my language. Kira Carver." "Kira," Thomas repeated, testing the name. "I love it." Kira Carver proved to be a determined baby, strong, lunged, and stubborn. She kept them up at night and demanded constant attention, but Thomas and Jara fell in love with her more deeply every day. Watching Jara with their daughter, seeing the tenderness in her eyes when she sang to Kira, made Thomas fall in love with his wife all over again. The waystation adjusted to accommodate its newest member. Kessa proved to be a natural with the baby, often taking Kira when Jara needed to work or rest. The travelers who passed through the horse post cooed over the infant, and the government riders brought small gifts, tiny boots and soft blankets. When Kira was 6 months old, Jara returned to work part-time, taking on consulting jobs in the valley and leaving Kira with Thomas or Kessa. It was an adjustment, learning to balance parenthood with their responsibilities to the business, but they managed. They had become experts at managing difficult situations over the years, and this was just one more challenge to overcome together. 2 years after Kira's birth, Jara became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and when their second daughter was born in early spring, the delivery was quicker and less fraught. They named her Jessa, another name from Jara's language that meant joy, and she lived up to it from the start. Jessa was a cheerful baby, quick to laugh and slow to cry, the perfect complement to her more serious older sister. The waystation had become a true home now, full of life and noise and love. Kira was walking and getting into everything, and Jessa was beginning to smile and reach for things. Thomas and Jara moved through their days in a comfortable rhythm, parenting and working and building their life one moment at a time. On a spring evening, when the girls were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Thomas and Jara sat on the porch and watched the sunset. The new territorial road was busy now, a constant stream of traffic passing within sight of the way station. The horse post was thriving, more successful than Thomas had ever imagined it could be. "You ever think about how we got here?" Jara asked. She was leaning against Thomas, his arm around her shoulders. "About all the things that had to happen for this to work out." "All the time," Thomas admitted. "If the government had not built the road, if Captain Winters had not agreed to help, if you had taken that assignment to the eastern provinces. We came so close to losing each other so many times." "But we did not," Jara said. "We held on and we fought for this, and now we have everything." Thomas looked at his wife, at the woman who had knocked on his door 7 years ago and changed his entire life. She had a few more lines around her eyes now, and her hair had a bit more silver, but she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Still strong and fierce and stubborn, still brave enough to leap off cliffs, still his. "I love you," Thomas said. "I will love you for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Jara said. "Forever, remember, that was the deal." "Forever," Thomas agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. Inside the house, one of the girls started to fuss, and Jara sighed. "I should go check on them," she said, starting to rise. Thomas pulled her back down. "Give it a minute. Sometimes they settle on their own." Jara relaxed against him again, and sure enough, the fussing stopped after a moment. They stayed on the porch a while longer, just being together, just enjoying the quiet. This was not the life Thomas had imagined when he first bought the way station 8 years ago. He had pictured something simpler, quieter, just him and his work and the endless rhythm of the seasons. He had not imagined love or marriage or children. He had not imagined Jara, but now that he had all of it, he could not imagine anything else. This was his life, messy and chaotic and full of noise and joy. This was his family, built from patience and hope and a love that had refused to give up. This was everything. As the last light faded from the sky, Thomas and Jara finally went inside. They checked on the girls, pulling blankets up and brushing hair from small faces. Then they retired to their own room, to their own bed, and fell asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, Thomas woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of children laughing in the other room. Jara was already up, probably dealing with whatever mischief Kira had gotten into. Thomas lay in bed for a moment, listening to the sounds of his family, and smiled. He had waited 6 years for Jara to come home to him. He had bought a way station in the middle of nowhere, built a business from nothing, and learned patience he had not known he possessed. He had negotiated with government officials and caravan captains, had worried through pregnancies and sleepless nights with infants. He had given up the quiet, simple life he had planned and built something much bigger and more complicated in its place. And he would do it all again in a heartbeat. Thomas got out of bed and went to join his family. Jara was in the kitchen, Jessa on her hip and Kira at her feet, trying to help make breakfast. She looked up when Thomas entered and smiled, that brilliant smile that still made his heart race. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," Thomas replied and kissed her cheek. He picked up Kira, who immediately started telling him a complicated story about her doll, and took over stirring the porridge while Jara set the table. This was his life now. Ordinary and extraordinary, mundane and magical. This was what they had built together, what they had fought for and waited for and earned. This was home. Years passed, and the way station continued to thrive. Kira grew into a bright and curious child, always asking questions and getting into trouble. Jessa was more cautious but just as determined, and the two sisters were inseparable despite their differences. Thomas and Jara raised them with love and discipline, teaching them to be kind and strong and true to themselves. When Kira was 8 and Jessa was 6, Thomas and Jara sat them down for an important conversation. "Your mother and I want to tell you a story," Thomas began, "about how we met and fell in love." "We know that story," Kira said. "Mama was a guard and she came to the way station and you fell in love." "That is the short version," Jara said, "but there is more to it than that. There were things that made our love difficult, things we had to overcome." Thomas told them about Jara's oath to the caravan company, about the years they spent waiting and hoping. Jara told them about the moment Thomas offered to buy her contract, and how hurt and angry she had been, and how they had found a better way. "I tell you this because I want you to understand something important," Jara said. "Love is not always easy. Sometimes it requires patience and sacrifice and hard work. But if you find someone worth fighting for, someone who makes you better just by being in your life, you hold on to them. You do not give up, no matter how hard things get. Like you and Papa," Jessa said. "Like me and Papa," Jara agreed. Kira frowned thoughtfully. "Mama, why did it matter that you were an orc and Papa was human? Why did that make things difficult?" It was a question Thomas had been expecting. The girls were old enough now to notice the looks they sometimes got when they traveled to the valley, the way some people stared at their mixed heritage. They were old enough to understand prejudice, even if they did not yet have a word for it. "Some people believe that orcs and humans should not be together," Thomas said carefully. "They think that we are too different, that we should stay with our own kind. But your mother and I believe that love is more important than what other people think." "You care that Mama is an orc?" Kira asked. "I care that your mother is strong and brave and kind," Thomas said. "I care that she makes me laugh and challenges me to be better. The fact that she is an orc is just part of who she is, and I love every part of her. Even her tusks?" Jessa asked. "Especially her tusks," Thomas said, making Jara laugh. The girls seemed satisfied with this explanation, and the conversation moved on to other topics. But Thomas saw Jara's expression, the gratitude and love in her eyes, and he knew they had said the right things. As the girls grew older, the way station remained the center of their world. Kira developed an interest in the horses, spending hours learning about their care and training. Jessa was more interested in the business side, asking questions about accounting and logistics. Thomas and Jara encouraged both interests, teaching their daughters everything they knew and preparing them for whatever future they chose. When Kira was 12, she asked if she could learn to fight like her mother. Jara agreed and began teaching her the basics of self-defense and weapon handling. Jessa joined in reluctantly, more to spend time with her sister than out of any real interest in combat, but she proved to be surprisingly skilled. "You are a natural," Jara told Jessa after a particularly good training session. "You have good instincts and quick reflexes." "I do not want to be a guard like you were," Jessa said, "but it is good to know how to protect myself." "That is exactly right," Jara agreed. "Every person should know how to defend themselves if they need to, but you do not have to make it your life's work." The years continued to pass. The girls grew into young women, strong and capable and full of dreams. Kira announced that she wanted to work with horses, maybe become a breeder or trainer. Jessa declared her intention to take over the way station someday, to expand it into a full coaching inn with rooms for travelers and a proper dining hall. Thomas and Jara supported both dreams, helping their daughters plan for their futures while also teaching them the value of hard work and patience. They told them stories about the years they had spent waiting to be together, about the obstacles they had overcome, and the girls listened with understanding that came from their own experiences. When Thomas was 45 and Jara was 43, they had a conversation about the future. "The girls are nearly grown," Jara said. "Kira will be 18 next year and Jessa is not far behind. Soon they will not need us the way they do now." "That is both wonderful and terrifying," Thomas admitted. "I am proud of them, but I also keep wishing I could slow down time." "I know what you mean," Jara said. She reached for his hand. "But I have been thinking about what comes next for us. We have spent the last 15 years building this place and raising our children. What do we do when that chapter closes?" "Whatever we want," Thomas said. "We could expand the business like Jessa wants to do, or we could hire more staff and take more time for ourselves. We could travel, see some of those places you told me about from your guard days. We could do anything." "I like the sound of that," Jara said. "Anything. Together." "Always together," Thomas agreed. They did not rush into any decisions. They continued running the waystation, continued watching their daughters grow, continued building the life they had created. But they also began making plans for the future, talking about dreams and possibilities, imagining what the next chapter of their lives might look like. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Thomas and Jara stood on the porch of the waystation and looked out at the world they had built. The horse post was larger now, a thriving business that employed a dozen people. The territorial road was busy and well-maintained, bringing constant traffic past their door. Their daughters were grown and pursuing their own dreams, independent and strong. 20 years, Jara said. "It went by so fast, and so slow," Thomas added. "There were times in those first 6 years when I thought we would never get here." "But we did," Jara said. She turned to look at him, and Thomas saw the love in her eyes, as strong now as it had been 20 years ago. "We waited and we fought and we built something real. I would not change a single moment of it." "Neither would I," Thomas said. He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the familiar warmth of her body against his. "You know what I remember most from all those years?" "What?" "The moment I asked you to stay with me forever," Thomas said. "We were standing in this exact spot, and you had just handed me the last payment to repay the money I had tried to use to buy your contract. Your oath token was burning in the hearth, and you were holding your spear, about to hang it on the wall. And I said, 'Stay with me forever,' and you dropped the spear." Jara smiled, her eyes bright with memory. "I dropped the spear and started crying, I remember. You looked so surprised." "I was surprised," Thomas admitted. "I had never seen you cry before. I thought I had said something wrong." "You said everything right," Jara said. "You asked me to stay, not told me, not demanded it, but asked. Like my choice mattered, like I mattered. And I realized that in all my years of being bought and sold and told where to go and what to do, nobody had ever just asked me what I wanted. You were the first person to treat me like I had a choice." "You always had a choice," Thomas said. "I know that now," Jara said. "But I did not know it then. And when you asked me to stay forever, when you gave me that choice, something inside me broke open. All the walls I had built up, all the armor I wore to protect myself from being hurt, it all came crashing down. And I dropped my spear because I could not hold it anymore. I could not hold anything except the truth of how much I loved you." Thomas felt his own eyes stinging with tears. "You never told me that part before." "I am telling you now," Jara said, "because I want you to know. 20 years later, and I still feel that way. I still choose you every single day. I will keep choosing you for the rest of my life." "Forever," Thomas said. "Forever," Jara agreed. They kissed, long and slow, and Thomas felt the same spark he had felt on their wedding day, the same electricity that had been there from the very beginning. 20 years of marriage had not dimmed it. If anything, It had grown stronger, tempered by time and tested by hardship, and proved true again and again. Inside the waystation, they could hear the sounds of their family. Kira was arguing with one of the stable hands about the best way to treat a horse's injured hoof. Jessa was going over the accounts with Kessa, who was now a full partner in the business. Life continued, busy and chaotic and full of noise. But for this moment, Thomas and Jara just stood on the porch and held each other. They did not need words. They had said everything that mattered over the years, in 1,000 different ways, and they would keep saying it for whatever time they had left. "Come on," Jara said finally, pulling back with a smile. "We should go inside. Kira made a cake for our anniversary, and if we do not supervise, she will eat half of it before dinner." "That sounds like Kira," Thomas agreed. They went inside together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. They had waited 6 years to be together, had spent 20 more building a life, and they would spend however many remained simply being grateful for what they had found. In each other they had found home. They had found love. They had found forever, and that was more than enough.